Hello, viewers. Welcome to a brand new episode of India Roundup. We have a very interesting discussion lined up today, and we'd like to talk to Dr. Raj Dravid, an expert in the field of skill development. This is especially relevant in our country at this point of time in view of the very large changes that are taking place in the country's economy, the migration from villages to cities, automation that is going on. There are so many points of view. Let us look forward to this discussion. Thank you. Dr. Dravid, this is somewhat a nascent field. How did you get involved in skill development in the country, and what have your key contributions been so far?
How did I get involved in skill development is a very interesting story. I got involved in skill development for the past 15 years or so. It all started with an invitation to set up a ready-made garments unit in Bhiwadi, the borderline of Haryana and Rajasthan, a place called Chaupanki. The company needed a workforce of around 1,000 operators in 6 months. When I visited the place, I found myself in the middle of the agricultural field. In the entire 20-kilometer periphery, no youth were to be found. I had one fundamental belief, though, that has sustained me so far, and that is that a youth and his family will do whatever it takes to get a job, to earn their livelihood. So I approached the local government official and requested him if he can give me an updated list of unemployed youth in that area and the below poverty line youth database for me to mobilize. I also requested the collector if he can lend us a building that has not been used for any purpose for providing training. The collector ridiculed me and offered no assistance. Obviously, they had no database, no updated database. He further told me that the area had many conservative communities and they will not allow their children, boys and girls, to come for training. I then released a 4-line advertisement in the local paper to the effect that I will arrange for free training for sewing machine operation for a month, and not only I will provide the training but also offer them a regular job upon successful completion of training. I was not very sure about the impact as the collector had already put cold waters on my proposal. But to my utter surprise, next day there was a mile-long queue of aspirants. Mother-in-laws had brought their daughter-in-laws. Husbands had brought their wives on bicycle. A week into the training, I would like to narrate 2 incidences that made profound impression on me. On a visit to the center, I found an old lady holding an incredibly young, about a month-old baby and sitting under a tree shade. I asked her who she was, and she told me that she is from Ganganagar and the baby belongs to her daughter and she is in the class along with her husband. A driver had told them about her training. Another incident happened in Rohtak, where one day a group of 20 girls were sitting there to meet me. On inquiry, I was told that they were from the local orphanage for destitutes. The girl had no spark in their eyes, and each one had some harrowing story to be told. One was sold to a brothel by her husband. Second was beaten by in-laws and driven out of the house. Third had stabbed her molester. But when the training started, there was a perceptible change in their behavior. Till then, they had refused to believe that anyone could deal with them with dignity. This story prompted the CNN, which interviewed me later, to say that I was offering them stitching therapy. But the point I would like to highlight is that everyone needs training for livelihood. And it is more important to have the teaching ability than finding out the learning ability of the students. Around that time, I joined ILFS as the Chief Operating Officer for its skills group. As is well known, we were the early pioneers for designing and developing the skill delivery model from the private sector, while it was ironically the Ministry of Rural Development, not the Ministry of HRD, Ministry of Labour or Ministry of Training, that took the lead in pushing this model. Fortunately, the ministry had some very dedicated secretaries and joint secretaries who supported the mission wholeheartedly under the very able ministers like Mr. Jairam Ramesh. My work in those days was largely focused on the left-wing affected districts. Violence in these areas was at its peak. The local governance was negligible. Population was always caught in a cleft between Nakshals and the police. The youth were forced to join the militant groups as they had absolutely no other option. The collectors were routinely getting kidnapped. Poverty in some of the districts in Odisha was unbelievable. I once asked a girl from Kandhamal district what she had for breakfast when she came for training, as she looked very skinny. She could not follow my question. When repeated in local language, she replied that they cut some grass and soak it overnight, and next day they put some salt and chili, and that porridge is their breakfast, lunch and dinner. Such incidences reinforced my belief that we must, as a mission, train and place these children and get them into a national mainstream. How valid was this assumption? I'll come to a little bit later. Here I would like to mention about two unique programs that my team conceptualized. And here I must acknowledge the human contribution of Mr. Reddy, who was the MD of and who still is the MD of ILFS and is one of the pioneers who pioneered the concept of vocational education training by private sector. Under Mr. Reddy's guidance, we developed a program named as Parvaz for the minority community youth who have lost out on education. We created a sandwich scheme whereby they would study via open schooling and get trained in some vocational skill which will facilitate them in getting a job. Likewise, we developed another scheme named Himayat for the unemployed youth of J&K, Jammu and Kashmir. During my stint with ILFS, my team had trained and placed over 250,000 boys and girls in gainful employment. I then moved to Africa and shifted my base to Nairobi. As we know, Africa is 54 countries and each country has its own culture, ethos and problems. The crime by youth is a major concern in many countries. Agriculture is losing its appeal. Thousands of youth flock to the cities in search of jobs and no jobs are available. In desperation, they resort to crimes. I then started working with the smallhold farmers and started providing training for them in agriculture. Our project started getting funded by Rockefeller Foundation, USAID, and Alliance for Green Revolution in Agra. Very recently, Clinton Foundation has invited us to join them for projects in Malawi and Tanzania. In Africa, our focus is on identifying entrepreneurs using our patented psychometric profiling and finding their creditworthiness and helping them create a robust business plan. Like in India, mechanization and its training are an excessively big component of our intervention. What is the lesson drawn? Having trained so many youths and placing them in metro cities, I now realize that migration is an unnatural process. It is like kidney transplantation and our body tends to reject it. It is ideal, therefore, to provide gainful employment within 30 to 40 kilometer radius where the boys and girls reside.
Dr. Dravid, India is experiencing some sort of a movement in the area of skill development. Would you like to give to us a brief overview of the skill development movement in India?
In India, as we all know, India is one of the youngest nations in the world, and over 60% of its population is in the working age group of 15 to 59 years. Let me provide you another perspective that has implications on skill development in India. Our agriculture is getting older, average age of our farmers is 50 years. 54% of our population is less than 25 years. As youth are getting disenchanted with agriculture, they are flocking to the metro towns in search of employment. In Africa, average age of farmers is 60 years, and 60% of the population is less than 24 years of age. Thus, we have a huge section of young population that needs skills for living here as well as in Africa. Let me give you another forecast and perspective. While in the next 20 years, the labor force in the industrialized world is going to decline by 4%, while in India it is going to increase by 32%. What is the implication of that for skill development? Obviously, this is a huge challenge as well as a great opportunity. Our journey to skill development has been actually a very bumpy one. If you recall, earlier our government had taken a target of skilling 500 million youth by 2022, 1 year from now. This was a completely unrealistic target, and nobody knew how this figure was arrived at. In addition, there were at least 15 ministries that were involved in skill development, each with its own rules and regulations, and that obviously had to create enough confusion. This was like a cricket match with 11 umpires. The focus of the vocational education training, as managed by most ministries, was on the dropouts and the below poverty line boys and girls. It's a matter of great concern that in India, less than 5% received any kind of formal vocational education, while this figure for US is 52%. For Germany, it is 75%, and surprisingly 96% for South Korea. With the latest announcement a couple of weeks back on the new education policy 2020, the roadmap has achieved some clarity. The National Education Policy 2020 objective is that by 2025, 50% of the learners through the school and the higher education will have some exposure to vocational education.
Would you like to give to us your take on the skill development ecosystem in the country?
The biggest failure of our skill development program in the past has been our not realizing that the artificial and often forced migration will eventually meet limited success. The recent en masse migration of migrants to their villages also highlights the enormous risk-taking appetite, often more emotional than logical. A migrant is like a tree which has its roots in villages. Roots are attached to individuals and not communities, and they are not shared. Rootlessness is akin to losing individuality. Our attempt hereafter should be to strengthen the roots by taking the nutrients like industries, mechanized farming, and indigenous crafts to villages. Rural youth must get rural jobs. Urban youth must get urban jobs. What is my take on the current skill development ecosystem in the country? I need forbearance of viewers if I sound a bit harsh in my assessment of our skill development initiatives. Firstly, I believe we are mixing two different objectives of poverty alleviation and skill development. Who is the youth we are focusing on? He or she is most likely semi-literate or illiterate, lacking in drive, and struggling to meet both ends. He is already in a very dispirited position and suffers from severe handicaps. The self-esteem is exceptionally low. Expecting him or her to compete on the national and the world stage is irrational. We must pick up, therefore, the youth through scientific selection process, focus on literate students and train them appropriately. Unfortunately, our national obsession to look for foreign models has also been one of the factors muddying the waters. Year after year, we had delegations from different countries visiting India to sell their model, and we could not make up our mind. It would have been infinitely better if we had developed like China or like Korea or like Singapore, our own homegrown model, and tested it. Now we are following the German dual system, but that too not in full compliance. During my ILFS days, I was instrumental in forging a collaboration between us and the German Chamber of Crafts. On a visit to Germany, I asked them about the duration to make a plumber a world-class plumber. The answer was 3 years, and the dual system envisages 4 days training in the industry and 2 days in the training institution. And here we are trying to do that in 6 months. No wonder all of us have the experience of the electrician or plumber visiting our homes and making a hash of the repair. Our obsession with quantity over quality is another major area of concern. Focus on demand and supply and vocational education system not being very aspirational are some other concerns. Some 93% of our workforce is in the informal, unorganized sector. The rate of job growth in the informal sector is estimated to be twice that in the formal sector. Lack of information about the informal sector makes it a real challenge to map skills to create more effective training programs. India's labor force is also characterized by low and failing participation rate for women, from 33% to 27% in rural areas, and from 18 to 16% or so in urban areas between 2004 and 2011 to 2015. India, as we all know, ranks 10th from the bottom globally in terms of female labor participation. The World Bank estimated a labor force participation rate of 23% only for women and 79% for men in 2012. Therefore, an active policy to improve women's access to employment opportunity is the need of the hour. The recognition of prior learning, or RPL it is called, is becoming at best a certification program and needs a relook.
Dr. Dravid, I'd like to understand from you, what do you recommend should be the new changes to the skilling ecosystem that we have in India?
What should be the new changes to be brought into the current ecosystem? I believe that a scientifically validated integrate assessment system is a prerequisite. Not everybody can do every job. We need to identify what kind of trades are suitable to what kind of people. There has to be more focus on tapping non-cognitive skills, as they are the backbone for assimilating cognitive skills. And more importantly and critically, the training has to happen not in a sterile lab, but in the industry or in the industrial cluster. That gives them the real feel of working in the factories. And there has to be a genuine focus on the informal sector. As per the World Economic Forum, the drivers of change for the next decade are going to be the changing work environment and flexible working conditions. We are all already witnessing it in the new normal during COVID. Mobile internet, cloud technology, big data, Internet of Things, robotics, artificial intelligence, among others. These are the areas where we need to shift our focus. In other words, we have to go from elementary skills to higher level skills, level 1 to level 4 or level 5. And that need not be incremental, but it has to be transformational. We all know that with the advent of new technology, the old skills are no more in demand. The VET, the vocational education system, must understand the interplay between upskilling and downskilling. For example, with the GPS fitted in the car, the driver need not know the exact location. Downskilling. And at the same time, everyone can become an Ola or Uber driver which is upskilling. With robots cleaning floors and receiving guests at the hotel, housekeeping and reception jobs are becoming obsolete, downskilling. A robotic arm stitches the t-shirt and renders 17 sewing machine operators jobless and may force them to move up the value chain and by producing higher end clothing, which is upskilling. A robotic welding arm is 100% more accurate than manual welding, thus rendering welders jobless unless they graduate to higher level skill sets, downskilling as well as upskilling. With robotic hands, the surgeon gets a three-dimensional view of the operating part of the part needs to be operated, which increases his precision. The coders in the IT sector are jobless, downskilling, as advances in artificial intelligence have made them redundant. So at the end of the day, the game is won by those who see the changes and do the mid-course correction.
Dr. Dravid, I'd like to know your views on the future of skilling, especially in the background of the coronavirus situation that we have all over the country, also in view of the automation progress that the country is experiencing.
Let me summarize my thoughts on the future of skill development in the area of COVID and automation. A tree develops roots when it is well nurtured by nutrients provided abundantly by nature. The better the quality of inputs, the firmer are the roots. This fundamental reality has not been understood by most of the corporates, resulting in massive exodus in the form of reverse migration due to the pandemic, which we all witnessed. Counseling them to return is akin to offering homeopathic medicine for treating cancer. The solution must be deeper rooted and well thought of. Management must reflect how can the sense of belongingness, how can organization be an extension of the family, be created in the organization. Simply offering salaries and better perks reflects that they have not really grown beyond Maslow's primitive motivator. Sharing of thoughts and vision and carrying them like family is the need of the hour. Unfortunately for many workers, the sweatshops masquerading as companies is a place of exploitation, both physical and mental, and at the first sign of downturn, they are asked to leave. True not only of lower product manufacturing sweatshops, but truer of IT companies. Bottom line, the management and their HR must grow in their mindset. The reverse migration of thousands of workers to villages represents a form of collective irrationality. But behind this lies the most cavalier and insensitive disowning by the employers, the state and the NGOs, and large companies must rethink and figure out ways and means to attract the workers back to the workplace. Gender parity in vocational education is another area that needs prioritization. There must be strategic focus on identifying and nurturing entrepreneurs. So we need to train the youth both for gainful employment as well as developing entrepreneurship. Thank you.
I want to thank you very sincerely, Dr. Dravid. I've learned so much about the whole concept of skill development in India. Thank you very much.